So take a deep breath in, all the way down to the base of your spine. We'll start breathing from the mouth. It's a different kind of connection. Breathe all the way down and feel through your body to Mother Earth. Right from the beginning, allowing yourself to have the experience of being pure energy. So feel into your pelvis and just relax as much as you can, allowing it to disappear so you can feel the energy center. And feel the difference between breathing through your mouth and breathing through your nose and your sensation of what's available. Whenever you're ready, allow your attention to rise to the energy center below your belly button. Feel for the stillness between the breaths. When you're ready, move up to the solar plexus, just below the breastbone. Feeling all the way through, front, back, middle. Into the center of stillness. And whatever arises, allow it to melt. And become witness. We want to melt that which is between us and emptiness. When you're ready, gently allow your attention to move up to your heart center. Feeling into the stillness between the breaths. Understand that anything your mind does is trying to hijack your attention from this experience. When you're ready, gently allow your attention to move up to your throat. When you're ready, take your attention to the third eye. At a certain point, the energy will just move up of its own accord out the top of the head. Allow yourself to experience that which is beyond language. When you're ready, at your own pace, gently open your eyes. We're so happy to be here with you today. How may we serve? We love the breathing through the mouth because it's a way to connect to the body, but we don't have to be limited by the body. Feel free to unmute yourselves and begin talking. We're happy to speak with you. Yes.
This is an open-ended question, but can you talk a bit about surrender in the spiritual sense of the word?
So the question is, can you talk about surrender in the spiritual sense of the word? Well, as you've heard from us before, we prefer the word allowing because surrender is more of a yin experience than a a military giving up. It's an allowing of ourselves to experience the connection that all the rest of the natural world, including all the animals, lives from. So the entire manifest reality in quotes, that we experience is already connected. And of course, we are too. So what we are surrendering is our delusion that we are separate. So we are allowing, in that surrender, we are allowing to ourselves to experience our union with divine source. So we would, at this point, describe it more as a letting go of most of what happens in our mind is motivated by desire for whatever of the moment. And our fear arises from what we anticipate will happen if that desire is not fulfilled. So when we understand that the effort that the mind makes to hijack our connection is we're going to say always a distraction. And we'll amend it to say, as long as it's not life-threatening. And even if it is, it's a distraction. Ultimately, all of us are going to die. So in that moment, the fear of death becomes a distraction. Fortunately, our minds are not responsible for our that connection always is. It's our awareness of it that comes and goes. Does that answer the question?
I don't know.
And the reason, a lot of the reason we're talking about yin approach here is because so much of Rebecca's experience has been in the external world trying to do things that are mostly masculine. Becoming a doctor, although many more women are doctors now than used to be. It's considered a very masculine thing to do. And competition is largely a masculine endeavor. That's where the surrender word comes from. And surrender itself is not at all about competition. Except maybe the competition between our desire to know God and our desire for anything else. And we could easily have used the word goddess. There is no gender specificity, except habits of language. And, you know, maybe it's the compensation for being unable to bring babies into the world, that our language is that way. And we're experiencing that there's a certain time or place where wanting peace, internal peace, becomes so intense that there's a kind of natural letting go that we could also call surrender. There's a place where the internal cacophony just is no longer that appealing. And the awe and wonder of contact with love or self. What the mind has to offer, we've heard before. If we look for anything new, we will discover pretty quickly that anything new does not come from the mind. Inspiration comes from allowing. We know the truth of that statement from feeling deeply into ourselves. How may we serve?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Please.
So, to add to that conversation, is there ever such thing as too much allowing? And particularly, it's like when do you take action? Like when, yeah, if you could just speak about that.
there are stages of life that have different requirements for us and from us. But at all times, it is desirable to cultivate the quiet so that in the field of action, we are operating with a congruence that is completely connected to source, which is our highest best and the highest best for the whole. And so surrender in that case is the touching in through the breath, that's the end of the sentence, touching in through the breath. Does that make sense?
Yes and no.
Absolutely. Because even though we are involved in the field of action, as is appropriate, we are also quite capable of that connection. In the same time, we can be active and connected at the same time. And at certain stages of our life, it's very important to cultivate that and to understand that the action part is completely appropriate. And then this has to do with respecting the capacity of the body as it begins to wind down. Then the connection becomes more important than the action. It's always important, but for a long time, we're capable of both. And the greater our connection, the greater the gift of connection we have been given, the more responsibility we have to share it. Not necessarily by speaking about it, but by the choices we make in our lives every day about how we act and live our priorities. And the capacity to allow that connection to inform us. Becomes the foundational flow from which we do everything. So we would say it's important to touch base with our creative awareness. At the beginning and end of every day, if possible. But there is no room for self-judgment when life is so intense that we can't get to it always. Life itself is completely forgiving in every aspect. And so it's important that we keep a sense of humor about ourselves and this whole endeavor to be connected. Because the very seriousness that we give to our connection can become a limitation when we judge ourselves harshly for not cultivating that connection in a way that we think is enough, or the mind is so tricky in how it can create separation by judgment according to rules that don't exist. Except in our minds. And so imagine that this love is so powerful that it forgives everything instantly. And if we hold that truth, we can use that to dissolve the judgment that arises from overwhelming experience, which we all have, mostly on a daily basis. I'll give you an example. Ram Dass wrote a book after he had his stroke, and he really, really was hard on himself about the fact that while he was having the stroke, it didn't occur to him to meditate or say mantra or do any kind of spiritual practice. And so one could tell, and you can see for yourself by reading it, that there was an element of judgment in there. I'm not accomplished enough, that in the hot moment that was happening in my body, I didn't think of God. And we differ with that because love herself is always present and ever forgiving what we think is a lapse. Our matrix of belief is so deeply ingrained that it is often a reflexive, judgmental punisher that we have no control over. So it's important to ingrain in ourselves the understanding that we are never separate, and that sense of separation is punishment always from a matrix of belief that would have us be more separate. And it's very tricky, very, very tricky. And, we're all easily fooled by our own judgment. And it's important that we not vilify ourselves for not being in control of the moments where we need to be active. We don't always get to choose when those moments start and end, especially in the most active stages of our lives. Or we could say the most active stages of our days, and that applies to all of us. So much we see from studying astrology that so much of what occurs in our lives is beyond anything we have control over. So self-punishment, we will say, especially to the people on this call, be very distrusting of it. The fact that we all have consuming desire to know God is a fact. It's just a fact. We can take that for granted about ourselves. And so any judgment of failure or success about that is not really relevant. It just separates us further in moments when we need the connection the most. So laugh it off. Understand that God certainly has a sense of humor. And And the rule book that we have is usually written by some other forces than source energy. Not sure how we got there or who that pertains to, but that's what's coming out. So please, when we answer a question that seems far afield, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the answer for the person who asked it. It's the answer for the field that we are speaking to. But we hope that's a helpful answer. And we welcome any further questions or anything you'd like us to elaborate on.
Yeah, that was perfect for me. Thank you.
So welcome. How may we serve further? Such a joy to be here. Hi.
Hey, good morning. This matrix of belief can be pretty tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky.
And you're talking my language this morning, so thank you.
You're totally welcome. You're totally welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's our language and experience too.
Yes, yeah.
You know, we had an experience a few weeks ago through the ether where one of our teachers came and said, do this practice for 42 days. And Rebecca said, okay, there's going to be a problem when I am on vacation. And so that, you know, the being said, that's okay, you can do it this way. And then what happened to the 42-day commitment is it just kind of couldn't be held. It's too much time. And so there's been this, you know, judgment. You said you would do this and you're not doing it. And so this is an internal current conversation that's been going on for some days as other commitments seem more important. And so it's really interesting that having a sense of humor and
Right.
understanding that time and space are completely non-existent in the dimension that we're talking about. And so it has everything to do with intention and attention and very little to do with time and space. And so that's what we're informing Rebecca at this time. And that maybe this whole situation was a setup to make that point very graphically.
Yeah.
That the matrix of belief does everything in time and space. And source energy does not have time or space. And so this idea that we judge ourselves in the field of time and space is completely a setup in the mind.
Yeah.
And so we have to have a sense of humor about it. That's the only relief. Otherwise, you know, we are constantly stabbing ourselves in the chest for what? Nothing. This idea that we have that time and space is our limitation for connecting to source, and that's just not true at all. Commitments are important. Commitments are important, but
Yeah.
commitments are about inner feeling.
Yeah.
They're not about time and space.
It's about how we show up.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And it's about, the practice is about emptiness. The practice that Rebecca, agreed to do.
Mhm.
And so that is coming in spades, but it could easily be overridden by the judgment of time and space and what the practice, doing the letter of the law of the practice.
What is required.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so what a perfect setup
Yeah.
to understand that it is the energy itself, it is the experiential awe that's really the point, not any set of rules
Yeah.
that we have made up for ourselves to
Yeah.
create judgment that we can't possibly fulfill.
Thank you so, so much. That really, really hit home to me. And it's a gift. It's such a gift. Such a,
It
such a
really, it's just like, it's a joke. It's a joke.
thank you.
You're so welcome. Tricky. Mind is tricky. And when we understand that our fundamental commitment is to knowing that source, then everything falls into place. We're so grateful to our guides. And the willingness to have these experiences. Whatever makes that possible, totally grateful. Well, we're quite happy to go into meditation unless somebody wants to. Yes, please.
So, how many Anasas will we miss?
Oh,
What are-
yes. Yes. We have to talk about it. We're going on vacation. So, tell me again.
No Anasa on the 17th and the 24th.
There we go.
Okay. Okay.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
we're leaving next Sunday, but we're still going to have program.
Oh,
'Cause
you are.
Our plane is until much later in the day.
Great. Thank you.
Yes. So just so everybody knows, we're going to Spain to vacation with some relatives of Andrew's who live there. So it will be much fun. We haven't been anywhere since COVID, so we're very happy about this. And we will miss you for sure. And we'll come back different for sure.
Next session will be on the last day of the month, the 31st. I mean, after the 10th,
Did you hear that? Our next session will be on the 31st.
after you leave on the 10th. Well, next week and then.
Yeah, next week. Next Sunday, I'll be here. And then the 31st will be the session after that. Yeah, please come next week. Okay, let's meditate some more. Thank you so much for asking. I'd completely forgotten. Thanks, everybody. So happy to be with you. Till next week.